Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, Greg Anthony here, and glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this April 5th, 2017 day on our calendar. And you know, there's so much going on. I mean, with the advent of the internet and all the news you can get within a split second, with all the craziness going on in the world today and what's going on in Washington, it's really easy to get sidetracked on issues that really seem important, but are really not the main thing you should be thinking about. And what I'm getting at is, unless you understand the big picture of really what's going on in your country, in your religion, in the world, everything else really is makes little sense. We can deal with it like, okay, let's deal with the problem of this and that, and then go on to the next one. But the way the world is today, you could spend your whole life doing that. So let's put things, or try to put things, in proper perspective. I'm talking about the ultimate issues, the ones that really matter, that we never spend enough time thinking about. And we're basically like mind slaves. We hear something on the news and we chase that. We hear something from one of our politicians and we chase that. And we chase it all the way to the detriment of our own psyche, in a sense where we get so frustrated, so a feeling of guilt, maybe a feeling of anxiety, that we have really no time to really take a little time off, be patient, relax, and think about the important things. Now, what I'm getting at is, when we're looking at the chaos in the world today, and we're trying to piece out a life, piece out an existence that has some meaning, how do you start? Well, let me say this. I think a good place to start is within your own self. You have something that's very important to you, okay? And if you take that one thing that's important, for some it may be politics, for others it may be faith, for others it may be social integration, for some it may be helping animals, for some it may be getting homeless people off the street. So what I'm saying is, if you take what's important to you and expand upon it and open your mind up to the broad issues, then perhaps life's meaning comes to you somehow. And what I'm getting at is, I'm not really a good psychiatrist, or I'm not a good person to speak in these terms as I open the show today. I'm usually very specific. I have a topic, we discuss it, and we move on. But today I want to look at it from more of a personal perspective, and maybe you can look at it from your own personal perspective. For example, what I was interested in back in the early 1980s was to be a great journalist, to understand politics, to understand the world stage, to understand what other cultures were like. So I became a foreign correspondent in Italy, learning a new language, and confronting myself with a lot of things. I was right there in the belly of the beast, the Vatican, and I began my interests were politics. My interests were, wow, what is going on in the world? How come America got involved in the Vietnam War, and where are we today in the 1980s? And as I sat in Rome and did stories and watched what happened, I began to be very interested in the Vatican, very interested in the politics and all the scandals they were involved with. And that, to me, was the door that opened my mind up to what I'm talking about today. And fast forward to today, and I'm going to make some blanket statements. And they didn't come from just, I think that the Vatican and Islam are basically working together to overthrow Western civilization. Now, if I made that blanket statement without any facts, without any reason for it, it'd be kind of crazy. You could be put in an institution for things like that, right? And many people will try to put you in an institution even if you have facts. But so be it. So when I say that, the big picture is very simple. Let's first look, when I say the threat of the Vatican and Roman Catholicism, there is a system which is political, as well as what they want to do is make it seem as if they're the benevolent benefactors of Jesus Christ on earth. And they are the one mother church, and everyone should follow her. But really, that's a front. And what they really are a political organization, just an extension of the Roman Empire, trying to gain power in the world to control you. And they use religion as a guise. Now, what they did here in America, and why I say they are a threat, along with Islam, to destroy Western civilization, is that they came here a long, long time ago and came into this country with one thing in mind, and that was to gain entrance into a country that had freedom of religion, which they constructed, which they helped put into place. When you really understand the historic significance of the Vatican and our founding fathers, etc., etc. So they put into existence freedom of religion so that they could come here, because they were persona non grata in many European countries. They couldn't practice their faith because people figured out what they really were all about. They were about overthrowing governments, gaining control. And you must remember that the government of preference of the Vatican State, which is a legal country, it's like a football field, and they're a country that has great significance in the world and great wealth, probably more wealth than anyone. But they're the ultimate deceivers. So what they need is a place, the witches of America, to come in from one small archdiocese. Look at what they've grown into in this country. It's amazing. They have control of our government system. They have control of our educational system. They have control of the finances. I mean, when you start looking at the Vatican connections to all of this stuff, it seems impossible, but it is true. When you do and you piece together all the facts and you make the conclusion that these people, the Jesuit order along with the Vatican, now run by a Jesuit pope, have infiltrated this country through the guise of religion, through the guise of being Christ on earth, mingling with Christians, seemingly the same. And the one mistake people make, and when we're talking about the big picture, that's what I want to do right now, you can't make the mistake that Roman Catholicism is Christianity. It is not. Many of the followers believe it is because they've been told it is. But when you look at true Christianity and then you put it side by side with the traditions of the Catholic Church, nothing could be more different. So you have to make that distinction. And the Vatican makes that distinction because they allow Christian persecution to go on throughout the world. And why do they allow it? They even allow it here. And how they allow it here is very simple. It's a subtle takeover. For example, let's talk about the laws that are passed now that allow gay marriage to be legal. Christians believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. Now, you don't see Christians going around saying you got to follow our law. Like, for example, the Vatican's counterpart, the Muslims, will say, in the end, you have to follow Sharia law or nothing. And they do it through a matter of beheadings and torture and whatever. But Christians will say no. The law of the land is gay marriage is okay, right? But Christians believe in their heart that it's between a man and a woman because the Bible tells them that. Now, the difference between being a Christian and following the Vatican is that you get caught up in all of their occult traditions, because Catholicism is a hybrid of Babylonian pagan religion and Christianity. And that hybrid was put into place way back during the Roman Empire for one reason: control. Mesh the two together, but at the same time destroy true Christian beliefs, which no one will argue. The Vatican set out, created the Jesuits for one reason: the Counter-Reformation, to make sure that Bible-believing Christians did not become so powerful that they usurped everything the Vatican wanted in the future and had at the time. So what they did is they formed the Inquisition. I contend the Inquisition still goes on today. And how it goes on, in America for one, is subtle. For example, you're going to see a lot of Christians being persecuted for their faith, not being allowed to do business in certain areas, and I can go through 10 to 12 examples of Christians who are not allowed to practice their faith and do business at the same time. And I can show you that, but I don't have time right now. I have a number of examples, a subtle type of persecution. Then you can go to the overt persecution, which is very simple. The Tony Alamo ministry is one. And I've covered this story for 10 years. And what they've done is, when a group like this ministry who's done nothing but good works all throughout their existence, and they follow the King James Bible, but what happened in this ministry is they didn't take a 90% approach to the Bible. They began to understand that the Vatican institution was the Antichrist, as the Protestant reformers talked, the Antichrist institution. And so they started spreading this all over the world, and they had to be stopped. So 40 years have gone by of persecution, and you can go read this at freetonyalamo.com, a website we started to let people know that Christians are being persecuted here. Now, what the Vatican will do, many people don't get on board on this story because they read the mainstream media, who's working together with the Vatican, who have labeled this group as a cult, which they're not. They accuse them of doing what they do. And then they called their pastor and had him wrongly convicted in a court of complete idiocy. When you look at the way this man was treated, it's worse than a Sharia court in a sense, because they put him in jail for 175 years. A slow torture, right? For nothing. The reason they put him there was because he criticized the Vatican and the Jesuit order and their control of our government and their control of our foreign policy and the way they are manipulating this country so that in the end, Western civilization is destroyed. So they took him, put him away on false charges. Then they rounded up all the children and kidnapped them, took them to a cult headquarters called Wellspring, indoctrinated them, and then a few of the backsliders that testified against Tony lied. And that's common when you look at what goes on in our government. Aren't people getting accustomed to lying is okay in certain instances like this? Now look at our leaders. Can you go to them as an example of truth tellers? No. I mean, I can just think of two examples right now. Just think of Benghazi, where Hillary Clinton, along with Susan Rice, who's in the news again, Obama's national security advisor, openly lied when they knew that that the people at Benghazi were being attacked. They didn't send help for they could have gotten jets over there in 45 minutes to protect them, but they didn't. Then they went on TV and said, no, this was a video, they thought. It wasn't a real terror attack, which delayed their actions. That was proven to be a lie because information came out that they knew it was an attack and did nothing. In fact, wanted our men to die. These people are still walking around Washington. So what kind of example do they set? So we have certain people that will lie for money, and all these children are taken away. Now they're in the process of taking away all the property that these people have worked for. And nobody in this country cares. That's okay. Because they read the news and say, well, the easy way out is just to believe them. Being slaves, led by the nose, by the people who tell you false stories. That's fake news. And what I'm saying is, the mainstream media is complicit in this story, along with the government and every government that doesn't free this man and allow this ministry to practice Christianity here. So this is one perfect example of the Inquisition today. Now, all of the facts throughout the last decade or 20 years that I've looked at this story accumulate to a point that you make the conclusion that how has the Vatican influence, with all of their government involvement in over 200 countries of the world where they have concordates, working together with governments to get favors. And how can I make the blanket statement, they are here, came here in the beginning through the working together with our founding fathers to create a false narrative regarding who they really are. Yes, everyone believes the Catholicism is, they do good works. Priests teach children. But what are they teaching? Now, from that kind of deception, we have what's called a takeover from within. Now, let's look at the Vatican connection to Islam, because I said this. We have two religions here, two groups, political groups, posing as religions that have infiltrated our country from within that will be the destruction of Western civilization. So what have we done the last couple of weeks? Now, granted, my information regarding the Vatican is much more extensive, and I've spent much more time trying to alert people of this problem, which is difficult, very difficult, because the Vatican has taken on a complete different attack mode, so to speak. It's easy to point back to their transgressions, easy to point to their genocides, even as far back as as near as World War II, when we've done stories about their connection to the genocide in Yugoslavia, their connection to the Nazis, etc., etc. But in recent times, since World War II, they tried to change their image. Now, in the 90s, we pointed out a story in Bosnia, not in Bosnia, well, out of two, but in African countries where they supported and actually were behind the genocides of many African people. So that was in the 90s. Okay, so it's not that far away. But if you look back to their roots when they were going through the Inquisition, it's pretty easy to say, wow, how could they kill people just because they wanted to read the Bible? What kind of organization is that? But what they've done is they've gone kind of underground. They've created this kind of approach that we've changed. We're no longer the same group. We've seen the errors of the past are not what we are today. And so they create all these smoke screens. One, they want you to accept them even though they're a bunch of perverts, right? Which is interesting. I mean, we don't even talk anymore about the pedophilia problem in the Catholic Church because there's so many other things going on. But that, to me, was a way to indoctrinate people into their indoctrinate people into their perversions and accept their perversions. But what they did then is created this ecumenical movement, which means they're accepting all religions. Everything, the Pope has said atheists can go to heaven, and all of these denigrations of Jesus and everything is accepted, and Muhammad is equal to Jesus, etc., etc. And everyone coming under the umbrella, which they seem, it's this kumbaya approach. And I always say, the kumbaya approach, as soon as you turn your back, you're going to get a knife in it. But they still want to remain, the umbrella overall. We are still the mother church, but we accept all of you into our fold, even though you're a Buddhist, even though you're a Muslim, even though you're an atheist, Lutherans, Catholics, etc. And it's interesting that 2017 is a huge year, and Protestants watch it, because this is the, 500-year anniversary or something of, some big number year of the Protestant Reformation. And the Vatican is getting together with the Lutheran Church to say, we are together. We are one now. All of that's behind us. And so they're trying to erase history. They're changing even the narrative of what they really did during the Protestant Reformation. And Protestants are buying it, hook, line, and sinker. So what is happening? In a short 20-minute discussion here, I think I've showed you clearly why I make the statement that the Vatican is instrumental in the overthrow of Western civilization for their own gain. Now, there's so many other examples we can use, and we can go back to, we can say, why does the Pope support illegal immigration? Why are you seeing the middle class in America being destroyed? Where are the Christian principles? Why can't you say prayers in church? Etc. It goes on and on and on. But the point is, this has been a steady plan that's been going on for hundreds of years. And so if you put all those facts together, then that statement doesn't seem so outlandish, doesn't seem to be a statement where I should be put away in a mental institution for saying it. But the problem is, all of these facts and all of the things that we can bring up are never told to the masses, are hidden by the media who works for these people. And they still have not even gotten to the main subject. They have not gotten to the ultimate issue, and that is that what is the Vatican at its roots? It is a pagan hybrid religion, bringing Babylonian paganism and Christianity together for one aim, nothing good. Secondly, what is their goal here? Their goal here from the beginning was to infiltrate within. When they were small numbers, what did they do? They acted as if they were a lamb. But once they became powerful, now they're acting like wolves. They're telling you outright what their plans are. And so when I make this ultimate statement, what's the two things I would like you to get out of it? Until we're going to talk about Islam in the second half hour, and how basically the Vatican and Islam, I call it the 1-2 punch. Two of them together. Now, closing in on Judeo-Christianity and the world for complete control. And two systems that seem diametrically opposed are actually very much alike. So what would I want you to get out of this? One, understand that Roman Catholicism and Christianity are not the same. So understand and try to go look at the traditions of Catholicism and Christianity. And secondly, that from the beginning, the formation of this country, the Vatican was involved, and they created it for a secret reason, for a hidden agenda that's still going on today, and it started with our founding fathers, and even before that. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, glad you're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal. And I wanted to clear up one thing that I said in the first half hour regarding, one major understanding that needs to be thought about, and that is that there's a difference between Catholicism and Christianity. But, since the ecumenical movement, we have to add something here. I believe there's a great difference between true Christianity, Protestantism today as it exists in our churches, and Catholicism, because Protestantism is nothing more than basically little brothers of Catholicism, little brothers and sisters of Catholicism. They've lost the protest in that word. And so really there are three groups, I think, major groups, that are being meshed together, and creates a lot of confusion. Now, how does Islam fit into the picture? Well, we've done shows. I'll be honest with you, I know a lot more about the Vatican roots, about how Catholicism was created, and the stories they give us that are false. starting out with Peter was the first pope, etc. And it just goes on and on. The story that they give us about how Catholicism is the one true Church of Jesus Christ are completely erroneous. Now, the fundamental thing you have to do as a Catholic is to, and I'm primarily saying this to Catholics who haven't gotten to that point, you have to really question your hierarchy and ask these questions. And I'll leave it at that. But as we move to Islam, you have to do the same thing, since it is the fastest growing religion in the world, comparable to Catholicism in numbers. And where did it come from? And we know it started out in the 600s and wasn't around before that. And we've tried to show you different, we played a show on a guy from England who really went in depth and found out that, boy, it's really difficult. The story that are given to Muslims today about the foundations of their religion and Muhammad don't seem to add up. And then there's another, in fact, what he found was it's very difficult to even trace that Muhammad existed. And if he did, there's so much, so many discrepancies from the story that's given to people today, and you have to go and listen to my show a couple days ago and get that, and try to figure it out, especially people who are in the Muslim faith, Muslim religion. What I'm getting at is that when I started to look at critics of Catholicism, I found that many ex-Catholics were the harshest critics. Those who came out of the beast and became true Christians saw what was really going on because they were involved in the indoctrination, as I was, of all of the brainwashing techniques used in Catholicism. Now, I believe the same thing exists in Islam, and I'm finding the same thing. I've called upon ex-Muslims who have realized that this is not a religion of tolerance, that has realized they're here for one reason, and that is to destroy Western civilization, and in particularly in Europe, Canada, Australia, and America, from within as well as overt terror attacks, radical Islam, ISIS, etc., etc. And so it's important that those in the Muslim religion understand what their hierarchy is all about. But it seems to be a little bit more difficult because there isn't as much writing about it. It's more of an oral tradition that's passed on, and what these ex-Muslims have taught me is that they look to the Quran and read it and show you all of what it's really about, the intolerance of the Quran, the intolerance of the religion. And then there's the aspect that some researchers have found out that the Vatican back at that time was instrumental in creating Islam, creating the enemy in that area of the world at the time to destroy true Christianity and Judaism, using them as an ally, creating this religion. And when you start reading the Quran and understanding Catholicism, there are many similarities between the two religions, which lead me to believe that some of the researchers that have found this information are on the right trail. Then as you talk to ex-Muslims, they start telling the stories that they read about the perversions of Muhammad. And so we've got discrepancies there of where this religion came from. But one thing is clear. It is not a religion of tolerance. And in a sense, it's working together today with the Vatican. And why do I say that? Because I've researched it and found that they've even created what they call Chrislam. There are many Muslim sympathizers in the Catholic Church, many high-level bishops. One, Father Michel, Jesuits, Father Michel, Father Dalloglio, working together with Islam, lying to us, saying it's a religion of tolerance. And you're seeing many articles written by the Jesuits on how we have to accept Islam, how we have to accept this religion, and how we can work together. And when you see the connection you start to understand that they were connected at the hip in the beginning, and they are connected at the hip today, doing the same thing, trying to destroy Judeo-Christianity as we speak. And we're seeing it play out right before our very eyes. And that's what some of the shows I've done over the last couple of weeks are trying to explain. So what I'm going to do is, for the last minute, I found a woman, I played the other day a woman from Canada who told you the truth about what she found out about her religion. Then I found a woman from America who was very passionate, an ex-Muslim, who said the same thing, that the Obama administration, for example, let me give you an example here before we do it, and I'll play a few minutes of that. Now, Christians, I believe, and we're lumping everybody together now, because I'm talking about the mainstream America who hasn't come to this conclusion that there are three divisions, I think, Catholicism, Protestantism, and then true Christianity here. But I think they voted for Trump and Pence because they felt their communities were being threatened by steady erosion of religious liberty under the Obama administration. Today, Christians are being attacked. They're called homophobes, bigots for their beliefs, correct? In fact, under Obama was basically creating all this anti-Christian sentiment, while at the same time he was propping up Islam, saying nothing but great things about it. So I think Christians, and I'm lumping them all together, the mainstream people who don't understand this, we're seeing that, we can't pray in church. Christian beliefs were considered white privilege. They were considered to be fringe groups, bigots, etc., etc. And I believe this is a definite plan. So we have Obama bringing the Muslim, idea that it's moderate into the mindset of people, so that people were accepting, Muslims over Christians here and giving them more protections than Christians are getting. Correct? For what reason? Very simple. To overthrow Judeo-Christianity and its thinking through many different ways. They do it through, within, by bringing groups here to teach that Muslims are Quran and everything is moderate when it's not, i.e. Fethullah Gulen and that movement we've talked about on this show. Secondly, they're overtly allowing radical groups, like groups in Islamberg that we've talked about. So we have radical Muslim groups on in compounds here, preaching death to America, and they're allowed to exist. There's over 30 to 40 of these groups. Islamberg up in upstate New York is an example. And on these sites, Sharia law is practiced. They know it's practiced. The FBI knows it's there, but they allow them to exist. Why? That question was asked, and they said, well, they're not considered a legitimate terror organization. What? But you can throw out the Tony Alamo ministry, a Christian ministry, but you can't go on their property? And when Americans tried to enter one of these Islamic compounds in America, you should read about that. They weren't allowed in and threatened. So we have what's going on here is this acceptance of Muslims and the denigration of Christianity for a reason. The Vatican's behind it. They work together, I believe. Now, I've told you a couple stories that are just shocking. In in Montana, just recently, there was a bill passed. Now, the bill on its face sounds good, but the underlying story doesn't sound too good. There's 100 senators and state senators, I believe, in Montana. There was a 54 to 46 vote to ban Sharia law in U.S. courts, in their state courts, which sounds good. But how come 46 Democrats voted against it? We have what's called now in California, they're going to pass a sanctuary state law, which is playing right in the hands of all this illegal immigration to allow Islam to grow. So the problem is we don't really have an understanding of what this religion is all about. So who better than to talk to people that have grown up in it to give us a better insight? And I found a woman, she's pretty mainstream. I've seen her on some mainstream shows, but not talking this way. Her name's Bridget Gabriel, and she wants to talk about the plan to destroy America from within. I believe she did this in 2011 or 12. So let's play about 10 minutes of Bridget Gabriel about how Islam is planning to destroy America from within. Here we go.
So here we are tonight. I'm going to share with you why I am so passionate about the issue of national security. And I'm going to share with you my life story. For those of you who do not know much about me, and this is the first night you hear anything from me. I come from Lebanon. I was born and raised in Lebanon, which used to be the only majority Christian country in the Middle East. We were open-minded, we were fair, we were tolerant, we were multicultural. We prided ourselves in our multiculturalism. We had open border policy. We welcomed everyone to come to our country because we wanted to share with them the westernization which we had created in the heart of the Arabic world. Muslims used to send their children to study in our universities because we had built the best universities in the Arabic world. They graduated and worked in our economy because we had built the best economy in the Middle East, even though we did not have any oil. Beirut became Paris of the Middle East, the banking capital of the Middle East. In 1965, National Geographic magazine had on its front cover, Lebanon, Eden of the Middle East. Unfortunately, all this began to change as the years went by. See, we got our independence in the early 40s. But by the 60s and 70s, the Christians had become the minority, and the Muslims had become the majority in Lebanon. And as the Islamic population grew in the country became less and less tolerant because they started pushing for more rights that were not compatible with our Judeo-Christian value system that we had created. And that's when the problem started. The problem was contained until the influx of the Palestinians out of Jordan in 1970, when Lebanon brought them in because we already had refugee camps. Actually, at that time, Lebanon was the only country in the Middle East to accept the third wave of Palestinians into Lebanon. The majority of them were Muslims. They put their heads together with the Muslims in Lebanon and declared jihad on the Christians. What they wanted to do is create a base from which to fight Israel, kill the Jews, and throw them into the sea. Something they tried to do in Jordan. Yasser Arafat and the Palestinians tried to do in Jordan, but they failed because of the dictatorship of the king. Yet they were able to come to Lebanon, use our open-mindedness, our fairness, our tolerance, our multiculturalism, and our democracy to topple our democracy. My 9/11 happened to me in 1975 when radical Muslims blew up my home, bringing it down, burying me under the rubble wounded as they shouted Allahu Akbar. My only crime was that I was a Christian living in a Christian town. I ended up in a hospital for 2.5 months. And as I laid in a hospital bed, hooked up to IVs in both arms, I would ask my parents, why did they do this to us? Why did they attack us? And my father would tell me, because we are Christians, the Muslims consider us infidels and they want to kill us. So I knew since I was a 10-year-old child that I am wanted dead simply because I was born into the Christian faith and lived in a Christian town. This is something so foreign to Christians in America. Because in America, our idea of persecution is, oh, I took my Bible with me to work today and people looked at me funny. That's our idea of persecution. Where I come from, our idea of persecution is they want to walk into this church and start shooting at you and killing you. Just like what they're doing in Iraq right now, just like what they're doing in Egypt right now, just like what they're doing in Syria, just like what they did in Lebanon. Actually, what launched the all-out war in Lebanon was 4 Muslims walked into a church service on a Sunday morning just like this and started shooting at people. That's what started the Lebanese Civil War. I ended up leaving the hospital and coming back home. But my home was no longer the home I left. I ended up living with my parents underground in an 8x10 bomb shelter without any electricity, any water, and very little food. To get some food, we would crawl out under the bombs, and we would dig out different dandelions and different vegetation and different greenery that grew around our bomb shelter because it was the only greenery we had. To get some...
Okay, I did want to mention something, and then we'll get back to her. Doesn't that really tell you what they could be trying to do here? That's why Americans, you have to wake up. Listen to what she's saying. She experienced it as a child. Here we go.
Water. We would crawl to a nearby spring in a ditch, surrounded by snipers trying to shoot at us just to get a drink of water. And before we left our bomb shelter, my mother and I and my father would say our last goodbyes because we did not know if we're going to come back alive or dead just to get a drink of water. And we would crawl in a ditch to what used to take a 5-minute walk would take us hours to get to the spring, where my mother had to use her stocking on top of the gallon of water to catch all the worms and all the junk and all the dirt and all the rocks so we can drink the water. And this became my existence. We lived in the mountains. In the wintertime it was so cold. And because we didn't have electricity, the electricity plant and the water plant was in a no man's land. And basically the Muslims controlled it. So if we would go out to turn it on, they would start shooting at it. And that's how we ended up without electricity or water. So to warm up in the wintertime, living underground, because we lived in a climate just like Minnesota, very cold in the winter. My father would walk out of our bomb shelter and break twigs from the trees and bring them into the bomb shelter. And he would pour kerosene or mazout or benzene on them and light them with a fire. And we would huddle around the fire to warm up. And many nights, we had an agreement that whoever woke up first, because many nights would fall asleep around the fire trying to warm up, whoever woke up first would drag the other two outside and slap them on their face until they wake up. Because many nights we would pass out because of carbon monoxide poisoning, lighting fire underground with no ventilation in a little bomb shelter. And this became my existence. And we would listen to the radio, and in the beginning of the war we thought, I remember my father would say to me when we went into the bomb shelter and, this little dumpy little place that my daddy used for storage, and he would say, oh, it's a temporary thing, it's just a week or 2 weeks, we'll be out, life will be back normal. Because we would hear, my daddy would tell me, oh, America's going to come save the Christians in Lebanon. America and the churches in America are going to hear what's happening to the Christians in Lebanon, and they're going to come save us. And then they would say, Britain is going to come save the Christians in Lebanon. France is going to come save the Christians in Lebanon. When they hear what's happening, nobody came and nobody cared. And as we started hearing about the massacres happening in the rest of the country, you see, the Palestinians and the Muslims put their heads together and formed Jaysh Lebanon al-Arabi, the Arabic Lebanese army. And they started massacring the Christians, taking over Christian cities and towns. They committed massacres that were seldom reported in the Western media because the majority of the Western media was located in West Beirut, the area that Yasser Arafat controlled. And nothing came out of there that Yasser Arafat did not approve of. They would surround Christian cities and towns and walk in and massacre the people. One of the biggest massacres in Lebanon was the city of Damour in the beginning of the war, a Christian city. They would walk into a bomb shelter. They would find a mother and a baby and a father hiding in a bomb shelter. They would take the baby, tie one leg of the baby to the mother and another one to the father, and pull the parents apart, splitting the child in half. They would walk to our churches, urinate and defecate on the altar, and then torch our churches. The last lady that worked for me, I hired her because she was mentally disturbed. I wanted to take care of her and her family. And the reason why she was mentally disturbed is because they walked into her bomb shelter. They tied her son, 16-year-old only son, on her lap, held a knife to her hand and made her slit her own son's throat, then raped her daughters in front of her. These are the stories that went unreported in the Western media. Nobody in the world cared to hear, and nobody in the world understood. And when the leftist Christians, when the Muslims would come to massacring them in these towns, and the leftists would tell them, you can't massacre us. We marched with you. We represented you in courts. We pushed for your rights. We are on your side. And the Muslims would look at them and say, you are nothing more than useful idiots. You are no different than the other Christians, infidels. But by the time these people woke up, it was too late. And some of them who fled to come and hide in our town, because it was the only Christian enclave left in South Lebanon, it was too late. We knew what our fate was going to be, because we were surrounded by the Islamic forces trying to slaughter us, because we were on the border with Israel. I come from a little town in southern Lebanon called Marjayoun, the Valley of Springs. If you have ever visited Metula in Israel on the northern border and stood on the border overlooking at Lebanon, my town is across the valley, across the border. We knew what our fate going to be because we heard of the massacres, and we knew our days were numbered. And we knew to our front were the Muslims and the Palestinians who are waiting to slaughter us so they can be at the border with Israel. But we knew that to our back was Israel, the Jews. And we knew that the two enemies, because at that time Israel was considered the enemy of Lebanon. We had no diplomatic relations in the 70s. We knew as Christians, if we go to the Jews and beg for help, the Jews are not going to slaughter us because we had more shared values with them than we had with the Muslims. So few people from my town went to Israel and begged for help. They flagged down an Israeli patrol and said, listen, we barely have 48 hours to live. If you don't come help us, we're going to be dead. So you help us, we'll be your buffer zone. It works out for both of us. Israel started coming in the middle of the night and bringing in ammunition and bringing in support and bringing in food for the military and bringing bomb shelters to people. And Israel would take Lebanese Christians, anybody who can fight between the age of 15 and 40, and take them into Israel and train them how to fight. Because we learned very early on in the war that you can have all your professional degrees behind you on the wall, your medical degree, your accounting degree, your law degree, your whatever degree. None of that will do you any good when you are faced with an enemy bent on killing you in the name of Allah. So Israel started to help, and Israel would come in the middle of the night, and this is how we lived for 3 years while no one in the world cared. I remember I was 13 years old, and a friend of ours from the militia, from our Christian militia, stopped by, and he said, Brigitte, I just want you to know that we heard on the radios today that the Muslim forces are planning a major attack against our town. And
okay, I have to cut it off. I'm going to play the rest of this for you next week. But isn't it interesting? Why didn't we help the Christians back then? We're doing the same thing today, and it's the same things going on in many other places in the world. I believe it's because our country is controlled by the Vatican, who wants to destroy Christianity. And this is a good story to listen to. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.